Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture, a premier manufacturer of LED lighting with the industry's greatest variety of fixtures for your complete lighting needs. Aperture recently announced the new Storm family of lights. With LED white light quality that matches natural daylight and classic tungsten bulbs, plus extreme low-end dimming while maintaining color quality. Discover more about the new Storm lights and the complete Aperture lighting ecosystem at aperture.com. Today we're speaking with a writer. Among his credits are Out of the Furnace, The Way Back, and Mayor of Easttown. We're pleased to welcome Brad Ingelsby. Brad, thank you for doing this.
Yes, welcome.
Oh, what a thrill, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
We'd love to start with our normal question, which is, how did you get to be where you are today? Is it something as a kid were you always jotting things down, or did you want to become a banker and then find this later? What's your story?
Well, it's a great question. I'd love to claim that I always wanted to be a writer, but that is not the case with me. I watched a lot of movies as a kid. I wasn't really an avid reader. I was really always watching movies. And I still didn't really have any idea that I wanted to be a writer until I was probably 20 or so, James and Roger. That was really, I went to school and studied marketing, which I don't know that I was ever in love with marketing either, but my father was a very practical guy and sort of encouraged me to, as I was still searching to figure out what it was I wanted to do, to at least be able to be employed and get health insurance and have an income. I studied business in college, and then when I was a junior in college, as an elective, I took a screenwriting course. My college really didn't offer a ton of classes in that involved movies or movie history or screenwriting, and so I found one. I think about halfway through the semester, my teacher was like, "Hey, is this something that you've ever given any idea to? Because you're way more interested in this than the other students." And I think it was maybe the first time that I thought, well, I don't know. I guess, maybe I should give it a thought, because I know I don't like marketing and I don't think I'm going to be particularly all that good at marketing. So maybe I should think about something else. And I graduated from business school. I took a year off. I was a school teacher for a year. And while I was teaching school, I sort of got up the courage to apply to writing programs, and was lucky enough to get into AFI in Los Angeles. And that was really where I studied writing. Up until then, I was kind of really studying scripts online and just trying to mimic the format. I remember getting to AFI and I was still writing in Microsoft Word. I didn't even have the software that I was supposed to have. And my teacher was kind enough to give me a copy of the program. And then once I got into it, I really just fell in love with it and couldn't think of anything else I wanted to do. And sort of I was just writing kind of nonstop for 2 years at AFI. And then how I became a professional screenwriter was, I guess like all of us, just a lot of luck. I had written 2 scripts. At that time at AFI, in order to graduate, in order to get your MFA, you had to submit 2 feature-length screenplays. And I submitted those screenplays. I actually moved back to Pennsylvania after I graduated because I just wasn't in love with living in Los Angeles, and I still felt like, God, I still have a long way to go to actually become a good writer. And I was in Pennsylvania selling insurance with my father, and a friend of mine who I'd met at AFI, Mike Pruss, who still works in the business. He's actually the head of Ridley Scott's company now. He was an assistant at the time at Universal, and he had just taken a job at, I think it was Focus. And he called me and said, listen, I've got this job. I'm able to read material now and bring in material. in a way that I wasn't before as an assistant. And do you have any scripts lying around that you think maybe would be a fit? And I said, listen, I have the 2 scripts that I graduated with. You have at it. And he read them both and said, I don't think they're quite right for us, but I think I can probably get you an agent. And he submitted the scripts to an agent at William Morris at the time. And the agent liked one of them. It used to be called The Low Dweller. It turned into Out of the Furnace. And the agent was like, in a couple weeks later, he sold the script and he was like, you need to move back to California. I had to walk into my father's office in the insurance agency and say, Dad, I'm sorry, I can't work with you anymore. I have to move back out to California to become a writer. So it was an awful lot of luck, guys. I'm almost embarrassed to tell that story because it makes it seem quite easy. I just got incredibly lucky to have someone like Mike in my life, to have an agent take a chance on me. So,
you say that you were studying screenplay writing. Is there a difference in studying writing and screenplays? And did you have to learn the difference between the two? And what is the difference between writing and
also, how do you learn how to write?
Okay, yeah.
Really interesting.
Leave the hard question to the end.
There certainly is a difference between playwriting and screenwriting and novel writing and short story writing, and they all have a certain format. And I think they're really, really different, actually, because a lot of people say that to me. They'll say, oh, would you be interested in writing this as a book? And I'll say, I don't even know where to start. I only know how to write screenplays. They're so different. They're so incredibly different. And if you think about it on just a basic level, about if you're reading a novel, you're allowed to get into the thoughts of a character in a way that you're not allowed to in a screenplay. A screenplay really is a sort of a blueprint for how, pass on to a director, a cinematographer like you, Roger, take these blueprints and turn them into images. At first, James, I did have an interest in maybe writing short stories. That was interesting to me. I actually applied to some other writing programs that weren't specifically screenwriting programs, but when I had to make a choice between a creative writing school or a screenwriting school, I felt that my passion was more in screenwriting, that if I had to pick one, that I wanted to be a screenwriter. And a screenplay is a very specific type of writing. If you look at a screenplay, and as I know you guys have looked at
A few
over the years. There's not a ton of, sometimes depending on the writer, I suppose, there's not a ton of words on the page. It's sort of a lot of white, whereas if you're looking at a book, it's obviously, there's a lot of words on the page. I would say it's most closely related to a play. If you were to look at a play and look at a screenplay, they would, you could see the similarities in those two as opposed to a novel and a screenplay. And I think there's a very specific way of writing a script that I quite enjoy. And it's trying to get the viewer into a character's, into their beliefs and their ideas and how they came to have those beliefs and those ideas without really having access to telling the viewer how those things came. And so you have to be very strategic with dialogue. It's sort of, what do you say and when do you say it and what don't you say and what can you give an actor to perform and what's the kind of, like, I'd say magic spot where all those come together. What's the confluence of all those things that allows a viewer to understand a character, without having access to all the thoughts going on inside their head at every second of every day. How do you write, Roger? That's a really great question. I'm not sure if I've learned how to do it yet, if I'm being completely honest, but I think, what always interested me, I think, is that when I was a kid, movies were tapping into something that I was experiencing emotionally, and I didn't quite understand why or how, but when I saw a movie like Breaking Away, when I was young, it really impacted me because I was thinking, oh, that's like the friendship I have with my friends. How is that writer who knows nothing about me tapping into all the feelings that I have as a kid? Oh, I want to be able to do that. How do I do that? What's the connective piece that is able to connect his story about a group of townies who swim in a quarry? How is that connecting to the feelings I have? I don't know how to do that, but I want to get at the source. I want to try to aim. And that's what I like about writing most, is if I'm able to move people emotionally or illuminate a part of their own lives, and I don't have anything in common with them, but I'm able to tap into something emotionally in a character, a world, a sequence, a family that reflects on their own lives in some way. And that's, I think, what got me interested in writing was, how do I do that? How do I get at the source of what that person is able to do? How are they connecting with me emotionally, even though I don't know this person, I don't share their experience? But that was always very interesting to me, is how do I connect to people emotionally, or how am I tapping into something that is able to move people in some way? And so I think it's always, I think I'm always driven by the emotion of a story, a character's journey. I think that's always what's important to me. How I get there, Roger, I'm not totally sure. I think it's a lot of trial and error, a lot of throwing away pages, a lot of tossing out ideas, but eventually getting at something that starts to feel true and genuine, and trying to strip away all the layers that don't. And sometimes it's hard to judge what feels true and genuine.
And all the while trying to do this not only just through dialogue. So are you thinking visually, like you're thinking, oh, there's an abandoned Christmas tree behind them by the curb, and that's saying, I mean, are you trying to put in hints like that? Because it also depends on who's going to be cast, but...
Oh, yeah. No, of course. I think, I tend to overwrite. I've gotten this note my whole life. I'm an overwriter. I put way too much in the description. And yeah, I've gotten this note my whole life, and it's just the way I do. But I think it's getting at what you're saying, James, is I'd rather sort of give too much and then have someone say, hey, I don't need that much, or I'd rather do that than go in the opposite direction and leave it open for interpretation. I think a part of that's me just, I guess, wanting more control of the process, perhaps selfishly. But I like putting more in the scene descriptions. I like being really descriptive. It's this kind of night. This is what's happening. The weather is this. This is what's on the TV. I really do think that a lot of it is in the details. And if you can really nail the details, if anything, it at least gives the viewer a sense that the people telling the story know what they're talking about. And it at least lets the viewer start to feel like, oh, we're in good hands. This person knows this world. He or she has gotten the details right. And I can sit back and trust that I'm being taken on a journey by someone who understands the world and the characters and the people. And I think that's sort of what the details give you is conviction. Oh, this person knows what they're talking about. Now I can sit back and be taking on the ride. I know I'm in good hands. And then it allows you to get sucked into the emotional journey and not be worrying about the details, because you have a sense of satisfaction that they're being handled the right way. So that's why I like getting the details right. I think, in the specific is the universal,
Yeah, can we go back a little bit? Because that took quite a while before it became a film. But in your first films were the Honeyfields and the Dynamiter. Can you talk about those? Because they seem to relate to what you've just been talking about. It's the Dynamiter is very much about the details of this boy's life.
Yes, and so those two, Roger, and so the Honeyfields was actually my a thesis movie that I did at AFI, and it was so the directors at AFI, they had to make a short movie. That was how they got their degree. That was sort of the final project, and I was working alongside. I had a friend who's still a friend, Matt Gordon, who I met at AFI, and he asked me, "Hey, I have to make a movie." Like half an hour long, roughly, or a little less, and would you write a script? And we had watched a documentary. I can't remember the name of it now, but we had watched a documentary about a pair of boys in Mississippi, and he said, "Can you do something around brotherhood, and can the story be roughly or loosely kind of inspired by this idea, because that's what I'm interested in." And we worked on the script together, and we made it in the spring of, I guess, 2024, I guess would it be, at AFI. And then when we graduated, Matt said, "I'd love to expand on that idea, and can we take this idea of the brothers and make it into a feature?" And God bless him. He, I wrote the script with him, with his guidance, and he raised the money himself. And I think he, I don't know how much of it he actually got or how much he put on his credit cards. I would imagine a lot of it was the latter. And we made this film together about these two brothers in Mississippi. It's a very observational piece about the details and the specifics of daily life in a very specific part of the country. And I think that's what really interests me most is like, I love getting into characters. I'm not a very good plot person. And The Dynamiter is a great example of a movie that doesn't have a strong plot. It's a very much a slice of life. I think that's what I like to do. And that's where I'm at my best as a writer is kind of aiming to be a master of the specifics of these characters' daily lives, and then how to get so good at that I know who the characters are and where they would go to eat and what they would say when they answer the phone and how they would talk to their mom, and then trying to find a story that is an excuse to spend time with these characters that I love. And that's I think that's been the biggest lesson or the hardest part of my career as a writer is trying to figure out the plot end of things. I grew up, I very much like character. Those were the movies that I grew up watching. I was very interested in character pieces, character studies. And so I really like that side. I like writing characters, yet an audience needs to be entertained. They need to feel tension. They need to be scared. They need to cry. They need all these other things that are why we go to the movies. So I've tried to find ways to write about characters I care about, while also embracing the genre expectations of a mystery or of a thriller or whatever the story kind of needs. And so that's I think the balance is trying to do character pieces that also have an engine. I would say they have a kind of engine attached to them that carries the viewer through the emotional arc of the show, but also has a sort of like a tension of its own.
Well, I think also you can watch a movie that's very strong on character and maybe less strong on plot, and I'll enjoy that movie better than a movie that's very strong on plot without characters, because I do go to the movies to learn about somebody else's life, to experience it. So when you were doing the Dynamiters, since you didn't grow up in Mississippi, how did you find those details?
Yeah, we went down there, James. That's a big part of it. I think a part of it is you have to, go to the place. You have to talk to the people. Luckily, a lot of the stories I've done have taken place in the Northeast, in Pennsylvania. I think a little bit of that's just laziness. I grew up here. I know the people. I know what their homes look like. I can write about them. But the few times I haven't done stories that take place here, you have to do a lot of research. I just did a movie called Lost Bus about the fire in Paradise, California, that, sadly is way too relevant today. But, going up there, spending time in the community, working closely with the real people, actually sending them pages and saying, guys, what doesn't resonate? What doesn't feel right? I think that's a big part of the process is being smart enough to give it over to somebody and saying, hey, listen, this is my best estimation, but I didn't grow up there. How would you say this? How would you do this? And tell me if I'm wrong. I think that's often a part of, when you deal with the real people, they feel like they can't tell you, oh, no, that's not right. And then you have to say, no, please, I want to hear everything that's wrong about this. I want everything to be wrong. So please don't feel bad about giving me any advice here. And I think a part of it is being smart enough to know what you don't know and say, guys, help me through this. I want this to be as realistic as possible. I can only spend so much time there. I want you to tell me how you would say this, or is this real? Is this where you would go on a Friday night? So I think in those instances where you're writing about a place you don't know or a group of people you don't know, it's really helpful to lean into, if there's real people involved, to lean on them, or go to the place and then lean on tech advisors and just, have the ability to know that there's people that are going to be more educated and have lived the experience more than you have, and lean on them to tell you and guide you, while also respecting that the story needs to go a certain way. That's always the tricky part is hey, the story needs to go this way. Well, it didn't happen exactly that way. Well, what's the most realistic version where it could happen that way, where the audience isn't taken out of the story? That becomes a bit of a compromise at times.
And if you're trying to get feedback from non-writers, all they know is, but that's not how it happened. They're not thinking story-wise, and you still have to deliver a story. Yeah,
that's so true. Yeah. I think that's so true. That's the hard part is you have to be very polite about it. Say, I know it didn't happen that way, but we kind of need it to happen that way, which is unfortunate. But that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Were you on the set all the time on Dynamiter, and how did it come about? I mean, we found it a really beautiful film, and the performances are quite wonderful. And there's nobody in the film that we recognize. So I wonder how the whole film was set up and how it was cast.
Well, I can't believe you guys watched it. Thank you so much. I'm going to have to text everybody involved and tell them. It was great. They'll be so excited. That's really sweet. Well, actually, Matt, our director, really, and I actually just experienced this a little bit again on the show I was doing. But Matt, our director, Roger, he wanted to go down there and he wanted to find real kids, and he wanted to find the people in that area to be in the movie. So he went down there a couple months early. He lived there. And he just started reading kids and he put out word to all the schools and high schools, and he auditioned a bunch of kids, and he found those kids who actually lived in the area. I'm not sure how far away each of them lived, but they lived, in the area, maybe an hour away or a couple hours away. And so he really embraced the region. And I was only there for about a week. I think it was actually sadly right when Out of the Furnace sold as a script. And so I had to go to California right around there. And so I was down there for a week or two. So I didn't get to be as much a part of it as I wanted to be in terms of the production. But I think what Matt was aiming for, and what I think he achieved, was a sense of realism, and he really embraced the non-professional acting. And I thought the kids did such a wonderful job, and there was a realness and innocence about them. And I just loved that idea that he was aiming for something different in the movie. And I think he really got amazing performances out of the kids in that. And it was such a great experience, and I'm so proud of the movie. A part of that is just be like I don't know how Matt was able to do it with the money and getting the resources together, and that sort of attitude of we're just going to make something come hell or high water, it's going to get done. So but I really love the spirit of that, and I love that he was aiming to do something different, and I think the performances and the relationships are really just really amazing. And just on the show we just filmed, our director Jeremiah, he kind of had a similar idea. He wanted to bring in kids from the area and cast kids in the area, and we found a number of kids that way that are in the new TV series that we just filmed in the spring, and it was another wonderful experience. And I think we got something out of those kids that we may not have achieved if we have gone a different route. Anyway, I really, and I don't know, it's just nice to cast kids who grew up here and are from the area. And I think there's just, outside of getting a different performance out of them, I just like the idea that you're pulling resources from the area where you're shooting it. And I really love that about it. And the kids were so thrilled. To have, it was great. Anyway, it was a lovely, and the kids were amazing. They were such lovely people to work with.
Well, you have to be brave too. You have to believe that you can pull the performance out of them. And when you're successful, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, do you think that a writer should be on the set or shouldn't be on the set?
That's a great question. Roger can speak to this more. I'm curious what his opinion is, because I'm sure he's dealt with directors who say,
depends on the writer.
Well, I think also sometimes What you said earlier is you write it, then you turn it over to people, because it does go through different iterations. And even in prep, as we go through the script over and over and over, it changes a little bit because of who's in it and how it's going to go. And then when you start shooting and the actors do what they do, it changes again. So oftentimes when they pull the writers back, if they're rewriting some scene that we haven't shot yet, based on the original script, it's not what the movie is anymore, I think. But I really want to know what you think, so.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's extraordinarily helpful to have the writer there. Now, that's speaking as a writer, so that's probably the most obvious answer. But I just think it's funny because on the movies I've done, I haven't been... I would say I've worked with directors who were like, I really would love you to be there as much as possible. And I've worked with directors who were like, see you later. If I never see you again, it'll be too soon. And having done the television show where the writer is, kind of has to be there every day, I have seen the tremendous value in just an actor saying, hey, where am I again emotionally? What's the scene before this? So where was I coming? I just learned my wife was having an affair. Okay, that's right. So when I start this scene, I'm in this place emotionally. That's right, Brad. Thank you for reminding me. That's how I'm going to play the scene. And that's one of many, many examples. I think what I found to be really helpful, and again, I've only really learned this recently, having been on the set all the time on the TV shows, is being kind of the guardian of the story and the guardian of the themes of the story. Okay, so that if you see someone say, "Oh, I don't think we need this," or "You think we can cut this line?" Well, wait a second. What's the ripple effect of that? That's a payoff that we have later. How do we, if we don't set it up, we don't pay it off? No, you have to say that line, in order for this reveal to be what it is. And being kind of the person that's able to take the aerial view of the show or the movie, as opposed to, oh, this is the scene we're in. This is what's going to make the scene really strong. Well, wait a second. It may make the scene strong, but it's going to impact this. And so I think in that way, it's incredibly helpful to have the writer there. I understand as a director, at times I wouldn't want someone kind of, have tap me on the shoulder, hey, you're messing that up, or I tend to stay back, and then when I see something that I feel like is really impacting like the scene or the emotion of the show or the themes of the show, then I'll jump in. But I do think having that person there just for the actors as a resource, again, where am I emotionally? Where am I coming off? What are the themes is really, really helpful.
Well, I would say I always thought, too, on a movie that was also the script supervisor's job, that the script supervisor should know the script so well that she knows also the rhythm the rhythm of the words, and the fact that one character uses this phrase all the time, so you can't let them change it at the time. But yes, those kind of things are so important because when you're shooting scene to scene, everybody else is forgetting what they did last week or something.
Yes,
and,
yes, absolutely. Well, a good script supervisor does that too. If you have a really strong one who's able to say, hey, wait a second. This is, I think you're exactly right, James. That's what a good script soup does, is say, wait a second, this is coming. Yeah, this is what this is coming on the heels of this. We should be taking this into account. These things need to be tracked emotionally, and then obviously all the little plot details have to be consistent as well.
Have you ever been on a movie on the set and been really interested in seeing how an actor can come in and say your lines and show you something new? I mean, I find that
funny. I was going to ask something similar, because I remember when we were doing Sicario and Benicio del Toro was saying, I don't need to say this, just look at my face. You know what I mean? I mean, because it is sometimes you're in a scene and you realize, wow, that dialogue might be distracting from actually what the scene is written about,
But that's when you have actors that are really in it,
It's such a good point. And I think that's where I think a part of my job is knowing when someone has a better idea than you, and it's always best idea wins. I think that's a great point with Benicio. Like, an actor comes up, he says, "Hey, listen, I mean, this has happened to me many, many times, and 9 times out of 10, the actor's right. Hey, I don't need to say this. A look is going to suffice. In fact, if I say the line, it's not gonna have as much of an impact."
Right.
And I think I think that's a really great quality about being a writer, is being able to say, yeah, let's do it. Hey, let's try it. I used to mentor young writers at AFI, and I think one of the things that always scared me a little bit about talking to young writers was, well, what if a director changes the line? And it's like, man, if that's what you're worried about, like, it's going to change so many times. If you're worried about and I think they didn't understand at that time, understandably, how much of a collaborative art being a screenwriter is. And I think you have to be open to other people's ideas. And if you want your words to be written or spoken exactly as they are without change, then I think you should go into writing novels or plays where you have a better shot at that than writing a screenplay. Because Roger, and James, how many people, a script is a blueprint that then the costume designer comes in with his or her own ideas, and the production designer, and of course the director and the producers. And if you are obstinate and just, hey, I'm not listening, that's never going to get far. And also, you want people to have ownership of the piece too, because it's going to get the best work out of it. You don't want to be the guy that's saying, no. You want to say, I want you to fall in love with this too, so that it brings out the best in who you are as an artist.
They bring their own passion to it. Yeah, exactly. You want people to be passionate and collaborate. Yeah. It's really, that was a really good segue to, you said the first script you wrote basically was was the low dweller that became out of the furnace. But I heard that went through quite a few iterations before it became a film. What about 6 or 7 years after you'd written it, right? Can you talk to us about how that kind of evolved?
So that was a spec script that I had written that sold to, at the time, Relativity. That was a company that existed, God, I guess that was in maybe 2008 is when the script sold. And so that's a different experience. When you sell a script, you lose ownership to an extent. Now, I forget the exact contract of that deal, but at the time I had no leverage whatsoever. I was selling insurance with my father. So the agent goes, "Here's the deal. Are you interested in taking it?" I would have taken anything. Truly, I was like, "Great, just tell me where to sign." I think I had maybe one rewrite that was built into the contract, meaning that they had to keep me around for one rewrite, one set of notes. And then at that point, they could say goodbye. And so a director came on probably about a year after we sold it. It was Rupert Sanders. He came on, and we developed it for about a year. And I think we talked about a number of actors. We actually did a couple drafts of the script, I think, Roger. And then we got to the point where Relatively had to say yes. And I forget exactly who the actor was attached at that time. It was so long ago. And they basically said, "No, we don't think this movie with this actor is gonna work." And so then Rupert left the project. At that point, all of my steps as a writer had been exhausted, so they didn't have to come back to me. So they brought on Scott Cooper, who had done Crazy Heart at the time, and Scott is a writer himself. And so when they brought on Scott, he said, "Listen, I'm going to take a pass at the script myself." He took over the writing process at that point, and he changed it into Out of the Furnace, but that was a few years after Rupert left. So the script was sort of in limbo for 2 years without much really happening, which isn't a shock. That happens quite a bit in the industry. A script is hot, and then it goes cold, and it comes around, and you're lucky if it comes around again. I've been on the opposite side of that. So when he came back on, he's a writer himself. he was able to change the script, and he kind of took over the process at that point, and I wasn't really involved anymore. He wrote a draft that got the green light, that got the actors attached, and then Relativity was able to green light the movie off of his script. And I didn't really have any, I would say that was a project that I wasn't really involved in after my writing with Rupert ended.
Wow.
I wasn't really involved. And that happens sometimes, especially when you get a writer director. And, I also understand that side of things, that, it just happens sometimes that when you have a project and a writer takes over, they have their own vision, and it's their right to take it in a different direction. And Scott was able to do that. And I think he got amazing. I think the performances in that movie are incredible.
It's a really powerful film, but I'm kind of interested in how the final film differed from your original script.
It's quite a bit different. It really is. I would say my original script, and it's I would say it's a very flawed script, being honest. I mean, I was, I think, 23 or 24 when I wrote it. So looking back on it, I'm like, oh, I would say my original script was a bit more of a thriller. It definitely had more of a thriller engine to it, for better or worse. I'm not saying mine was better. It was just it was more of a thriller. The bones of the story were in place. A guy gets released from jail. He comes home. He tries to make amends with his brother. His brother's in debt with some bad guys. His brother gets killed. But I think from there it gets quite a bit. It's really different. I think if I remember correctly, in mine, he recruits an old friend who in the movie was, I think, Sam Shepard. And they go and they attack these guys at a bar, and it's a very big action sequence. And our character comes home, the Christian Bale character comes home. He kind of believes, well, I've done the thing that I thought I was going to do. There was that love triangle of the woman he loved now dating the Forrest Whitaker character. That was in the script. And he comes home thinking he's done the thing. He's avenged his brother's death, and there was one guy left alive who comes after him. And it was, I would say, the story was about the folly of revenge, and because what happened in the original script is he does this thing thinking he's doing the right thing, and by going and getting revenge, like, everyone he loves kind of ends up getting killed. He brings these people back on the people he loves, and he ends up alone in the end. So it changed quite a bit. I would say Scott's movie's much more of a drama. It's much more of a character piece drama, whereas I think The Low Dweller was a thriller with a bit more of an engine to it, I would say. But I mean, I'm really proud about it. The first, I think Scott did a great job. The performances are great, but it changed quite a bit, and I think it changed quite a bit.
Where do these ideas come from? I mean, it's a very different idea than Dynamiter, isn't it? I mean, then you also wrote a film, Run All Night, which again is very, very different than some of the other things you've written. Where do those ideas come from?
Yeah, I think a part of those, ideas, Run All Night and Low Dweller specifically, were driven by, when we were at AFI, our teacher said, hey, listen, you have to find a voice, and yet you also have to understand the commercial side of the business. And I think, I think those movies specifically, those scripts specifically, were aimed at a young writer trying to break into the business. I think in a really good way. I wanted to get an agent. I wanted to have a chance to get something made. And I think that at the time it was, let me write something that has a thriller engine to it. That was what Low Dweller was. Hey, this is a movie that we could cast. We could get a really good cast. I think those parts are castable with movie stars, and it has a thriller engine. And I think those scripts, Run All Night specifically, was very much I have to. Yeah, I have to sell something, or I have to leave LA. I mean, truly, you know, I remember saying to my wife, because after Low Dweller sold, there was a number of years where I was trying to get work and I didn't have a lot. And I can remember trying to buy a house and the lender said, you made $11,000 last year. How could I ever give you a mortgage, you know? And I think Run All Night was a very, if I'm being honest, was very much a way for me to try to, I mean, I'm very proud of the work, but I have to be honest and say at the time I have to sell something, and I'd love to do, my version of Boogie Nights, but that's going to be hard to sell. So what's a movie I can write that I think I can actually sell so I can stay here and try to make this for a few more years? And so Run All Night was very much a action movie through and through that I hoped I could sell to a studio, and was lucky enough to do that. And I think now I would probably not write Run All Night if I didn't have to. I would probably stick to the character pieces that really are the reason I got into the business. And by the way, I had a great experience with Jama on that, and Liam was wonderful, Ed Harris was wonderful. But I think now I would, if I could, I would write character pieces for the rest of my life. That's really where I aim to be and would like to stay. I'm sure there will come a time where I've got to write another Run All Night and I'll have to go back to that. But I'll see how long I can make it last,
It must be heartbreaking to write something and then have to pass it on and then see what they do with it, because I know we've worked on movies that we accept the script when we say, yes, we're going to do it, the script that's there, and by the time we shoot, it's completely different and not the movie that we thought. So, but we didn't write it, so I can't imagine what that feels like.
Yeah, I think, again, I think it's a part of, it's funny. I've been on both sides now. On the TV show, you get to be the boss, which comes with its own set of kind of demands and issues that I never experienced as a movie writer. Because I sort of, what I've been able to do recently in movies is I've only written on spec. And so what that allows me to do, James, is that I can write the script, and then I can say when I have a partner, hey, you can't get rid of me as a writer if you want to be a part of this, and a lot of this is the PTSD from having been, just kicked off. And I can say, and not that I can tell the director what to do, of course, but I can be a part of hiring the director and listening to the director and knowing that, oh, this director understands what the movie's about.
Right.
He or she has different ideas, hopefully stronger ideas than I have. And they're bringing, as you said, Roger, they're bringing like the passion that people are additive in some way. And I can interview the people and say, yeah, I think this person would be great. Are they going to have different ideas than me? Sure. But I think those ideas could really help the story. And so I've been able to do that recently in movies because I've had my heart broken, where I've written something that I'm really passionate about, and then you get it sent back to you and you're like, wow, what happened? And not that it's better or worse, it's just different. And it's hard to deal with that. But it gives you a thick skin. And it's funny, having done the shows now where you get to be the boss of everything, there's a part of me that's like, I kind of like the movies where I don't have to sit in on the budget calls and I don't have to be on, there's a part of me that loves the process of writing something and trusting someone, to bring a bit of themselves into it that I don't have. And so I'm at peace with that in a way. I think I go into those I'm a lot more open to that process than I was as a younger writer. It doesn't hurt as much, and I kind of accept that there's going to be changes, and that's all a part of the process. But yeah, I mean, it does hurt, especially when you feel like, I think it hurts most when you feel like, man, there was a better movie in there. That's when it really stings.
Yes.
Is, oh man, I thought. I'm
no
sure
one
you
will
guys
ever
have
know.
experienced, and no one will ever know, right? And that's the hardest part is, I thought there was a better movie. I thought we did a little better than that, but yeah. And then you got to tell people, no, it was better than that. Yeah, right. No.
You should have seen my version. Yeah.
So writing writing for television must also allow you to do more with the character because you've got more time, so you can have a longer arc, and if they do something unexpected, you could have planted the clues beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, talk about MARE of EASTTOWN, because that's very specifically that, isn't it?
What a great character.
It's a great character, and it's a great series. And it's kind of a great combination of what you were talking about starting off with, the detail of character that draws you in. And sure, the mystery and the solving the riddles is interesting, but it's the characters, I think, that keep you attached to it.
They're flawed, not pristine.
Yeah, well, they're real,
and that makes you believe them much more strongly.
Yeah, that's right, Jamie. I think that's what really appeals to me most about writing in TV is, as you said, you nailed it. It's just you get to spend more time with people. And I think the more time you spend with people, it's like life. The more time you spend with people, the deeper your relationship with that person is. You get to know more about them. As you said, the flaws, all the warts, and also the great qualities. And it also allows you more time to surprise an audience. I thought they were like this, but then they're like this. Oh, now they're like this. And I really love TV for that reason specifically. It just gives me more time with characters. You know, that really is what I love most about it. Is I've always just seen myself as a character writer, and that's where I think I'm at my best, is writing characters. And if I get to write more of them and spend more time with them, then I'm in a really happy place. Most movies you can really only get into one character. I mean, there's obviously other movies, Altman's movies, where you're kind of hopping around to many characters. Yeah. Typically, you can really only get into one character's head, or that's typically what we see. Whereas a show, you get to bounce around, and for me, that's the great joy. Is how I get to write more characters. I get to spend more time with them. I get to know them in a deeper way, and I think that is what people look for in TV. Is that connection with people is, I really like spending time with them. I really love spending time with that group of people. And I think that it just allows you to dig in a way that you wouldn't have access to in a movie, just because of the time. It's just a time thing, really. And I love that you get to spend time with people and secondary characters too. That's what I love so much about MARE. Is that I was able to pop around to Julianne Nicholson's character, and I was able to spend time with this character and that character, and we were able to get into their lives too. And that's really what I like most about writing, the kind of the specifics of the daily life of these characters. And I think that's where, as a writer, I can be dangerous, and having that many hours to tell a story, I think is really, really helpful.
And it's also depending on the casting, because in getting Kate's not afraid to look dirty. She's not afraid to have stringy hair. And if you had someone that had to look good all the time, no matter what the story was, you wouldn't have believed it as much. So it was such a perfect piece of casting there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys have worked with her. I mean, she's incredible. She's just incredible. And I can't see that character, and I just can never see it except for Kate. But the thing I really loved about Kate was how vigilant she was about the story. Like you said, it was never about, I want to say more lines or I want to look a certain way. She would always come up to me and go, Brad, if this character came at 10 o'clock, they wouldn't be able to get to my house at 8. And how are we making, and I couldn't believe how smart she was when it came to, it was always about the story, which I so admired about Kate. She always was the protector of the story. And I felt like on set, I had someone there who had my back all the time about, especially a story like that, where it was quite intricate. This person had to be here at this time, and if this person said this information had to come out here. And to have someone who was so protective of every little detail all the time. And it was the same in post-production. We'd send her cuts, and she would say, wait, if the text message went out at 9, it couldn't have gotten there at 10. And it was never about her. It was always about the story. And what a gift to have an actor who's really trying to make the best version of the story. What a incredible gift that was.
Do you think that television allows you to do more, not true stories, but you know how a lot of times in movies things have to get softened, and a really strong script gets a little softened around the edges to get it into the theaters. Do you think it's possible in TV? I know there's a lot of soft TV out there, but is it more possible to do something more kind of gritty and true in TV?
I think it's getting a bit, I think there was a time, I feel like now some of the TV is getting a bit softer itself. I feel I was recently reading an article that said essentially that there were these really amazing they did all these shows that had existed in HBO, The Wire. Now there's a lot of TV, but how much of it is really exceptional? And there still is exceptional stuff. I mean, that comes out. Underground Railroad was, one that was really exceptional. And there's a lot of others I'm missing. But I think at least some of the TV I've watched recently has kind of retreated into a more, I don't want to say generic, but there's sort of less risk taking. I see that it's different now because you're able to cast at such an incredible level. Like the actors that would never work in TV in the past are coming here and they're flocking to TV. And so you're able to get that. And also the budgets in TV are quite high. But a lot of the stuff I feel at times is yeah, it's good. It looks really good, but is it exceptional? And so I think there is an opportunity to have that in TV, but the TV that I've watched recently, I don't know, maybe I'm picking the wrong shows, has been a bit like, I think it's been okay. I think those kind of shows that popped in the past, The Sopranos, the groundbreaking shows of the past, we don't see as many of them. And
I think you're right.
Think it's something, and I think it's something that, as I go into a show, you're always trying to go like, how do I make this stand out? How do I make sure every episode is riveting? Because a lot of the shows, I think there's a bit of I think what I've seen a lot is a great opening episode, not much happens in the middle, and then they bring it back up at the end. And what I want to see is something that's really riveting all the way through, that every episode earns a seat at the table, that you can't miss that episode because it's going to have an impact on this episode. And it's something we really try to talk about in the edit is like, how is this episode great on its own? It can't just be, well, we'll get them to the next one.
Yeah.
It can't just be, let's let them hang around long enough, because people have so many options these days. And we want them to feel like, oh, that episode was really richly imagined. It had a beginning, a middle, and end. The setups and payoffs were very good. I feel like I want to make a show where I don't, as a viewer, I don't go, that was a bit lazy. It was fine, but it was a bit lazy. And I want to make sure that, when I'm writing an episode, that, I don't know, I guess it's maybe like the Catholic guilt I feel. I don't want the viewer walking away going, well, that was fine. I kind of wasted an hour. I want them to be like, wow, that was rich. It was written by someone who cares. It was made by people who really cared. And they took the time to have setups and payoffs. They took the time to know that we expected this to happen and this actually happened. And they took the time to take care of all the people in the show while also maintaining the arc. And I think that's something that, I don't know if we'll succeed on the next show or not, but that we really try to do in the writing and the editing is try to be like, how do we make people walk away from the show being like, wow, that was a rich episode. A lot happened. I'm glad that I watched that. That was really well done. And it's not always the case, and it's not always the way they walk away. But I do feel like at times I watch shows and go, I could have skipped a couple episodes and not really missed anything here,
Well, before you start a show, do you have all the episodes written, or do you just have an outline?
No, I really try to have all of them written. We had them all written on MARE, and on the latest show, we had them all written. And I like to do that because then when you have an issue on set, if something's not working or a scene isn't quite what you imagined, or there's a budget issue. I wanted the set piece on the bridge. We can't film at a bridge. You got to have the set piece in a hallway, if you know where the characters are going and you know where it ends and you know where you have to go, then as a writer, I think I'm way more nimble to fix those things. Okay, it can't be the bridge. A set piece has to happen in a hallway. But these are the three things emotionally as a viewer we need to get out of it. I know where I have to go. I can rewrite the sequence. But if I don't know where I'm going, James, that's when I really struggle. So if I know where I have to go emotionally with each character, I can be pretty nimble in terms of rewriting because I know that the parameters, the guardrails are set up, that the character has to get here emotionally. So I can't go too far outside this zone or this zone. I have to stay within these, these guardrails. So I like having all the episodes written. And I feel like that's a really, it's a luxury to have as a crew and a group of actors to have a whole story laid out in front of you and not be like, what happens in the next episode? I don't know where I'm going emotionally,
Well, and also I think whenever you're working on a movie or a television show, you want as much done that you can do ahead of time, because in the chaos of shooting, the last thing you want to do is, I got to go home and write next week's episode. That would be awful.
Oh my gosh. Exactly right. That's my worst nightmare. I can tell you that.
But also writers have a pretty strong position in TV too.
Yes.
You must like that.
It was a bit of a shock to the system for me. I think I had gotten so used to being the guy that sends the script off, and so to be there and, as I said, to have all of that power was a adjustment, I would say. I was very much and still am very much a kind of a writer and a homebody. Like even when I went to film school, AFI would make you work on the sets of the student movies, and that was like, I got to go to set. I just want to stay home. I don't want to hold the boom or work the craft service. I've gotten used to being on set, but I still very much like the idea of waking up and, tackle a story or a scene and write. That really is, I think, me at my best. I've gotten used to being on set, and I think I can be effective now because I know how to talk to actors, and I can help, as I said, maintain the integrity of the story on set. But it took a while to get used to it. I'm not that great on set. I like being at home in my office, hanging out with my kids and I'm not the best. I'm a bit of a homebody. But yeah, it's quite a adjustment, and to have all that power and have everyone asking you, what are we doing next? What's the prop? Is this the wallet they should have? Is this the keychain? What does their car look like? It was, I wasn't used to it. It took a while. I don't think I'm all that amazing at it still, but I've gotten used to at least accepting that that's a part of my responsibility on the show, and that I have to be ready for those questions and I have to anticipate them, and that if I'm not answering them, then everything slows down. So I have to know what the inside of the car looks like or what newspaper they're reading, and I have to be prepared for that. But it was a bit of a shock to the system, I have to be honest. I'm not the best at being the boss. That isn't my strong suit, I would say.
But it seems like one step towards directing. No ambitions to direct?
To direct a movie?
Yeah, that's a great... I do think about it a lot, Roger. I think about it, and then there are times where I just feel like my visual kind of brain isn't there. I can kind of see it on the page, and then if you said to me, Brad, what lens are we using, I would go, I have no idea. Maybe that's where I would have to rely on someone like you.
You don't need to, a director doesn't need to know it.
Some directors I've worked with, no idea what a lens does.
I mean, but how do they talk to you, Roger? I'm actually really curious. So if
it depends. There's the whole range. There's a whole range. I mean, with Joel and Ethan Coen, they're very specific. They don't necessarily say exactly what lens they want, but they're very specific about the shot and the axis on the scene. Whereas other directors will say, I just want to concentrate on talking to the actors. You tell me what we're going to shoot.
Well,
it's a whole range.
Also, having had conversations in the prep period about what you want from the movie, what the director wants from the movie, what the feel of the movie should be, then a lot of times on the day, you do a blocking rehearsal and the DP
Yep.
suggests, well, what about this? Because we talked about this, and then we move
Yep.
the camera there. And without the director having to say, oh, no, it should be this lens and that lens.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
just know
Yep.
what it is they want, but they don't know.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, as you said before, it's collaboration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's something I've talked about. I mean, I would love to do a little movie. I think about movies like the Dynamiter and just something of that ilk. Perhaps that I would like to do at some point. And maybe taking a stab at directing an episode is a good place to start. Working with a great DP like yourself, and kind of getting on the ground floor where they'll hear my ideas about the show. And I'd like to try. I think I'd be remiss if I think I would regret it if I didn't try it at some point. I may go once and never go again, but at least I could say I did it,
Yeah, it's a good idea doing a smaller one rather than a big one.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'd be a little scared to take on like 1917 or something like that. That would be it. I was just watching that film the other day, actually, right? It's such a wonderful movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the strength of that movie too is it's simplified to those two
my God.
guys.
Yeah,
It's
the
wonderful.
simplicity of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
I
wonderful.
find that movies that are kind of more stripped down, without 1,000 ideas they're trying to convey, but they're focusing on one or a couple of ideas are so much stronger.
I think you're right, because it gives you time to do the other, then the audience isn't getting so wrapped up in the plot details and they can just get immersed in the world. Like I just saw Honora, which was a bit of the same thing.
Right.
It wasn't much of a plot. This guy, he meets this young woman. She thinks they're married. I mean, the plot is quite simple, but man, you get to experience these people's lives. And I thought it was so well done that by the end you felt like you had, you've gotten to know this young woman in such a compelling way. Your heart was breaking for her. But again, it was a simple plot. I mean, super simple, So I think that's what I like, I think in the series, I always feel like I have to make the plot a little richer and deeper, and there has to be more twist. But I do love movies, like you said, James, just really simple, and you get to get caught up in these characters' lives and their worlds. Those are the movies that really inspired me as a kid to get into the business. It's not all the plot heavy thing. I love the little character pieces where the plot can be spoken in a single sentence.
Yeah. And also when you have characters that do unexpected things, something you wouldn't have seen coming, but as soon as it happens, you go, oh, yeah, because you believe it. Because that's true in real life. Somebody that does something completely unexpected, but it's not totally when you think about it. So.
Absolutely. I think that's so smart that you can do that you're able to surprise people in a way that they go, oh, of course that's what they did. I mean, those are the most amazing revelations as a writer is when you can subvert the expectations, but not leave. But the audience never goes, no, they wouldn't do that. That's, I love when you're able to do that, when you're able to take an expectation and do something different, but still be in the realm of what that character would do. Those are the best moments, I think, as a writer.
Yeah. And it must be that when you're writing, you're being careful not to make a character one-dimensional, that, oh, they're a slob and they're always this and they're always that. But instead, they're a slob that likes their teacup pristine or something, like people are. People are weird.
Absolutely. I think you're trying to give them dimension and as you said, surprise the audience. Oh, I thought that person was just that. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that when we went home with them, they're dealing with that and that. That explains that. How do you, I once talked to a journalist who said to me, it's the order of revelation. It's when things are revealed. It's how you parse out the information. That's what he said. And I've always carried that with me, that it's not just the information, it's when you give it out. At what time are you giving these pieces out? And I think that's a really smart way to think about a television show. I mean, a movie as well, but a television show in particular is if you were to give all this information at the top of the show, it would mean one thing. But if you were to split it up into its individual pieces and go, well, we'll learn this in episode 2, then we'll learn this in 3, then we'll learn this in 4, all those pieces suddenly take on a much different meaning, and your allegiance to a character is shifting, and your understanding of a character is deepening, and your hatred for a character is deepening or lessening depending on when these things go. And I think a part of that character is knowing the character and saying, all right, I know who this character is, but how do I want to reveal all of that? I know the secret they're dealing with, but if I gave it to you in episode 1, it would have an impact. But if I gave it to you when you understood them in one way, then I gave it to you in the 4th episode. Wow, that's like, it shatters you as a viewer. So I think a part of it is being strategic. Is once you know who the character is, when are you going to give the audience those pieces of that character, and how do you separate them? Because the instinct is, oh, I want to get everything out right away, but then you're missing an opportunity. And I think a part of that process of writing a show in particular is, here are the 100 things I have in the character's life, but I'm going to give you these ones here and these ones here. And I think that's a really smart way of looking at it, because then you're as a viewer, your knowledge of that person, your understanding them is constantly changing in a really good way. As you said, oh, I didn't think they would be mean to this person here, but then I know that this is what happened to them as a kid. That's why they did that there. And it keeps the audience off balance in a good way. It keeps them leaning in. Oh, I thought I knew this person, but I don't know them. Oh, I really did know them in this way. And I think you can only do that, like you said, I think you can only do that if you really know who they are. You can only be really dangerous with the bits of them if you have a really a deep understanding of who they are as a character and why they tick. And then once you get there, then you can be really dangerous with all the little bits of information along the way.
Yeah.
One last question. What advice would you give to a would-be writer?
I think the one thing I would say to a young writer is, and it sounds a bit like cliche, but I think it's to write what you're passionate about. And by that I mean, over the years I've met with a lot of writers who send scripts to me to read and give feedback. And what I often find is that the scripts that I get sent are, well, this is the next, this is the next A Quiet Place, or this is the next this. And I think what happens there is that you're, understandably, because you're trying to break in, I understand the desire to do that. And listen, I've done it. I just said I wrote action movies, so I've been there. But I think what I would say is that the fads are always changing. What was hot then isn't hot now. And if you write something that you're passionate about, that won't ever fade, right? That passion will continue. And I think sometimes we're writing to chase something, or writing to hit a moment, or we're heat-seeking missiles. We want to get at that. We want to do this. And I understand that, but I think if you write something you're passionate about, I think a couple of things happen. One is that it's something you're proud of and you're always going to be passionate about. And 2, people will see it. And they'll feel it on the page in a way that if you're just writing something, to sell it, or if you're just writing something, it just won't be there. And I've read enough scripts, and you've read enough scripts, where we can tell when someone is writing with authority, writing with conviction, writing with passion. You can really start to feel it on the page. And I think sometimes, especially people trying to break in, are aiming at something, or they're aiming at a target, as opposed to tapping into what makes them special as an artist, the things that kind of are what got them started as an artist. And I think if you're able to tap into those, that's going to come through on the page. And so that's why I try to tell young writers, write something that you're passionate, that speaks to what you want to be. And that's the other thing. And then this is the one thing that I've run into is, if you're a young writer, write something in the genre you want to stay in. Because if you write a mystery thing, but you hate mysteries, the agents are going to go, we found our next great mystery writer, and you're going to go, oh no, I just did that one time. I don't want to do that. Everyone wants to put you in a box. And so whatever box you want to be put in, I would say, right in that box to start, so that way, if you do sell something or if it gets out into the world, you're at least happy with that box you're in, as opposed to saying, no, wait, hold on, I want to go back in time and I want to be something else. And not that you can't change, but sometimes it just takes a long while to change that,
Yeah, it's funny in this business. I've talked to other cinematographers, and some say, well, how do I get out of doing comedies? Well, the problem is you got into doing comedies in the first place. If you didn't want to do them, then because you do get, like you say, you get boxed in, don't you? You get typecast.
Yeah, limited definition.
Yeah, limited definitions.
And so what do you tell them, Roger? I'm curious. What's your answer?
Well, just what you said. I thought it was a lovely answer. I say exactly the same thing. If you've got to, I mean, I'm just a cinematographer, but if I don't feel passionately about the script and the subject and the whole collaboration, I'm not going to do it, because I don't think you can do something that you're going to walk away from feeling you got satisfaction from. It's your life. It's too much of your life.
No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. That's absolutely true. And the older I get, the more true it becomes. There's just it's like life's too short. You have to find things that that really make you happy, and you can be proud of the work and proud of the process of making it. That's just really important.
Well, thank you for doing this. This has been great.
Thank you so much. What a thrill. This is an absolute thrill to meet you both. I'm so grateful you had me on the show.
Brilliant. I look forward to your next series, actually.
Yeah, we love characters.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. You take care.
Have a wonderful day, guys.
Bye. Ciao.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.